My name is Jen, and I have been teaching myself how to make stained glass at home. Throughout this entire experience, I have been documenting my projects, and I thought in honor of my progress, I would recreate my very first stained glass project. Let's talk about what I learned between my first and my ninth project. To be completely honest, I never know how to count my projects, and eventually I kind of stopped tracking them, but I actually started off by taking a community class using a lead cane version of stained glass, so technically the cow was my second stained glass project I ever made, but in most of my videos I say it was my first because it's just kind of easier to track everything. But it was my very first project that I made with the copper foil method, and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing or how different the copper foil method was compared to the lead cane method. I'm sure you can see from the footage, it did not look that great. But I was, and I am, so proud of it. We all start somewhere, and I can honestly say that for the most part, the feedback of posting my progress in learning stained glass has been really wonderful. The internet tends to be a highlight reel of everything beautiful and perfect, and let me tell you, learning stained glass is anything but glamorous, but it is rewarding. Let's talk about what I learned, what I improved on, and what I really struggled with the second time around. Technically, the second try at making the cow was my 10th attempt at stained glass in general for anybody out there keeping score. This piece that you see me cutting was the most difficult cut in the entire pattern. This was my first attempt that you're currently watching. I know I was holding the grousers the wrong way, but honestly, I don't think it would have helped. That curve was way too advanced for me to do, and I was really just trying to get familiar with the tools themselves. I did suffer a little cut, which happens quite often. I get a lot of comments about people saying I need to wear gloves, but honestly, it's a personal preference. If you feel like wearing gloves is best for you, then I say go for it. Don't even question it, just do it. I personally find that wearing them kind of inhibits me to handle the glass as well or learning how to use those tools as well, but I do wear gloves in other parts of making stained glass. Now, as you're gonna see in a second here, I just sort of gave up on the cut itself. I mean, if you can even really call it a cut. I just started breaking the glass, and I can honestly say I don't even know what I was doing or thinking in that moment. But at this point, I relied on my grinder because it was just easier and less intimidating. I had a brand new grinder and a new bit, so why not? And I know that I was probably just so excited to be able to do this on my own that I didn't even realize how terrible the grinding process was. When I went to recreate this project, that cut was still ridiculous to attempt as a beginner. I still didn't have that much experience under my belt, and curves, as I'm learning, take a long time to sort of understand and figure out. One little crack in the wrong direction can destroy an entire piece. It's one of the most frustrating parts of making stained glass for me, especially as a beginner with such a limited supply of glass, but it's part of learning. When I was attempting this project for the second time, I tried, I think, 3 different times to make that cut using what I knew at the time. It's always interesting to look back because it seems like with each project I improved just a little bit more, and reflecting on these videos and having to put myself back in that mindset of where I was during the time of actually making this project has been quite interesting to say the least. Because at this point, I have so much more knowledge and a little bit more experience, and that curve, although still difficult, isn't as ridiculous at this point in my journey as it was back then. After the last failed attempt, I decided I needed to just take a break because I was just getting more and more frustrated. I couldn't figure out how I could have possibly made this cut my first project, and now with more experience, I couldn't figure it out to save my life. This was one of the moments when I was so grateful for my decision to film all of my projects because I have the footage to look back on. So just a little tip, if you are learning how to make stained glass, at the very least, take photos during your progress. It'll jumpstart your memory on certain techniques, or maybe what you did wrong or what you did right. But more importantly, you'll have something to compare your progress to and give yourself a little boost of confidence when you need to see that improvement. But wouldn't you know it, when I went back and watched the original footage, the reason that I got through it wasn't because I had any idea what I was doing in the very beginning, or even that the cut had worked out. It was because I just gave up on it. I tried chipping away when I couldn't really figure out the cut, and then I just thought the grinder was a good idea, so I just used my grinder instead of actually cutting that piece. No shame in it, it was my first project, and that curve was challenging. Even right now, if I had to try it again, I'm sure I would still struggle with that deep curve, even though I'd probably be a little bit better. I do also want to note that at this point in my stained glass journey, I had no idea about the tapping method or that I should be using that ball on the cutting tools. You'll see it in a second here what I'm talking about when I try to use the grousers to tap the glass. I guess that's one of the downfalls of being self-taught, but I will say that even if someone told me to use the cutting tools, I still would have eventually tried the grousers at some point to see if it actually worked. You don't know if you don't try, right? But as I have gained a little bit more experience, I also learned that the tighter curves aren't really a great idea to use the tapping method with because they tend to break in the wrong spots. I don't know if that's just something I've experienced or a general rule in stained glass. It seems like the tapping method only works about 50% of the time for accuracy with me. There are a lot of factors that do go into it, like the shape that you're cutting, the density of the glass, if the glass is warm enough. Who knew there were so many details to pay attention to in order to learn stained glass? And even though I filmed my very first project from the start, I wasn't very good at getting the footage that I would learn I should capture. So some of my footage of that first project are short and limited, but hopefully you're able to see the difference between the cuts at the first cow and the second cow. But right here is when you're gonna see when I use the grousers for that tapping method. I'm obviously just kind of tapping all over the glass instead of on the score line, which could be the reason that it broke in the wrong spot. But this is all a learning experience. I definitely had no idea what I was doing, and so it was frustrating, and this is when I went back and sort of reviewed that footage and went back again and took what I had learned to put it into practice. Now, even when it came to grinding on my second attempt of the cow, which I think was like my 9th or 10th project, the markers that I was using were oil-based, so they bled a lot, and it made it a lot easier to come off while grinding. So that caused a lot of issues, but even with that, you can still see the improvement and the accuracy of the pieces fitting together. Even though it's still not perfect, it is a lot better than it was. Unfortunately, I don't have footage of that first cow after grinding, so these are the cuts, and you can see how much grinding I had ahead of me. I wish that I could zoom in and give you a clearer view of it. This is the second attempt, and you can see how much the cuts alone have improved. That very first time I made the cow, which was my first project, I think I was just really excited. Accuracy and perfection were not my goal. Completion was the goal. But to be fair, I really was trying. Learning something new takes time, and it took me a while to learn that patience is part of making stained glass. Those tedious parts need the attention to detail, even though you just want to rush right through them. Foiling was another step in the process that I didn't film with my first project, and honestly, I think it would have driven people insane watching my first attempt. It was really bad. I had no knowledge of copper foil or the difference between copper foil and lead came. I didn't know that burnishing tools were a thing or understand the importance of making sure the foil was truly pressed down. I also didn't understand why you needed to take time to fix the cracks in the foil, which I would absolutely learn in this project and my next one. Those are all things that you'll learn with experience, and eventually you'll get more comfortable with them. But for the first time, I am really proud to say that this piece is still standing because it was a pretty terrible foil job. As someone coming from no knowledge of background in stained glass, I do want to say that the people who have been making stained glass for years tend to advocate for things like using a marker as your burnishing tool. It might work for them, and it probably has something to do with the tools not being available back then or readily available when they first began. So they're just used to it, and that's what they got comfortable with. But spending that $5 to get burnishing tools significantly improved my copper foiling skills. Well, that and practice in general to learn what the copper foil lifting feels like on your fingers or spotting cracks, and understanding the different widths of copper foil. There's a lot of details that go into just a single step, and most of the knowledge is just going to come with experience. Because until you're actually doing it, you're not really going to understand the importance behind certain steps or details. But I really do recommend at least trying burnishing tools and to learn about foiling curves. Those two things really helped me improve overall. When it came to soldering, there is so much going through my brain right now that I want to share or address, but I'm going to try and really limit this. The soldering iron that I'm using in this video isn't made for stained glass, which I didn't know at the time. I will say I do love the iron itself once I learned how to use it a little bit better, but the tip that it comes with, and you can't get a wedge tip for it, was never going to allow me to have smooth solder lines. I will also say that during my first attempt at this, my temperature was way too low. Nothing would have improved those solder lines during that first attempt. All I had was that single lead came class under my belt, and soldering lead came is a lot different than it is with soldering copper foil. Everything from the temperature to the techniques, it's just a different process. but the only way to improve is through practice. I really do believe that you're not going to get any better if you aren't just going for it. Don't think too much about it, just try it. You're going to figure it out as you go. There are so many resources available at your fingertips, and if you're in any Facebook groups for stained glass, you can even post a picture for advice, and people will help you with tips and techniques. Take advantage of that. Of course, you'll get people who are sort of stuck in their ways, so my advice is to listen to everything, take it all in, try it out, but at the end of the day, find your own way. Now, as you're going to see in a second here, I add way too many dots to the solder. I do think that if I would have spread them out a little bit more, there wouldn't have been so many globs on the lines themselves. You'll see like little bubbles or waves in the solder. That's a sign that there's too much solder on your line, something I didn't learn until after I posted my videos on social media about this project. You can get rid of them either by lifting the piece and sort of letting that solder drop as you heat it up, or dragging some of that solder to a different line. I mean, just look at the dots themselves. Even though there's way too many of them on there and my solder lines still need improvement, just the fact that I'm more comfortable using the soldering iron, that I can put those dots on there more evenly, it just flows a lot better. It's the reason that I am so vocal about encouraging people to just go for it. I have had a lot of comments from people that, if we want to call them professional stained glass makers, who say, don't get started on, bigger projects right away. Start with something small. Practice on different things, blah, blah, blah. If you're not going for it, you're not going to improve. And so why not just go for it and see what happens? If I didn't take on these harder projects, I never would have gotten to where I am right now. But as you can see, this is my very first attempt and it is not great. I'm trying not to say that it's terrible because it's all a learning experience, but you can see the improvement between that first one and this one. And those little bumps on the solder line is kind of what I was talking about when I said that there was too much solder on the line. You can kind of see where it bevels up a little bit more than the other side. In either case, I did the beaded edge on both of them. Honestly, I don't even think the first attempt was considered a beaded edge. I don't even remember what I did. I think I just dragged solder while it was laying flat. This one was my second one, and that was when I learned that my soldering iron was never really going to allow me to make a clean beaded edge because of the tip. But it didn't turn out horrible. I think I did a pretty good job with the tools that I had on there. And now we get to the patina, and oh my goodness. I didn't know that you needed to prep solder for the patina. We didn't really learn about it during my lead came class, or at least not to the extent that you need to know for the copper foil method of making stained glass. So the first cow that you see, the one that looks like the black patina and sort of white mold or whatever has those spots are, I didn't do anything. I probably didn't even wash the flux off properly, if I'm being honest, because I didn't really understand the importance of it. And I honestly think I just used my hand and Dawn dish soap to kind of wash it off, and if anything, it was more of a rinse than a wash. There ended up being dark spots, inconsistency, and obviously it didn't hold up over time well because, well, it was a terrible job. But I didn't do anything to polish the piece afterwards either. I didn't know about it at that point. The second time I made the cow, I still hadn't quite figured out what worked best, but you'll see that there was improvement. At the very least, I washed the flux off pretty well, and I used a green scraper sponge to sort of scratch up that solder. It worked okay, but there were still a couple of spots that I could tell I had missed or maybe didn't wash as well. I also didn't know I was supposed to let the solder sit and dry for a while after washing it, so the patina I used shortly after washing it, and I think that didn't help either. But you'll see that the copper is bright and shiny. I even finished it off with wax, but again, I still didn't know to let the patina fully dry before doing that. It has been sitting in the window with direct sunlight for a few months now, and it still looks just as bright and shiny as it does in the end of this video that you'll see in a minute here. So there was definitely improvement. My biggest piece of advice for anyone starting to learn how to make stained glass is be prepared to work on your patience, because you're going to need it. You're going to have a beautiful project one day, and the next your glass is going to break in all of the wrong spots. It's all about the experience, and eventually you'll learn to adjust and figure it out as you go. I hope that people have been enjoying my progress updates as I learn stained glass as much as I'm enjoying putting these videos together, and there's something valuable inside each video I post for somebody. Thank you for being here, and until next time, stay glassy.